Today I'm going to show you how I like to edit vocals and get them ready for mixing. There's a couple of stages to this process, so we're going to quickly go through all of those, and by the end of it, you should be able to get a nice clean vocal ready for mixing. So first of all, let's assume you've tracked your vocals. The next thing you would do is comp it. So you'd go through, pick your takes like we've done here, and get your favorite stuff. So once you've comped all of your vocals and you picked all the best takes, all your double tracks, harmonies, all of that stuff, the next step would be to do some vocal tuning. Now I'll explain why I like to do tuning next. So generally I like to do the tuning stage after I've comped everything. Before I do any timing edits and anything like that, I like to use Melodyne to tune the vocals, and then I will bounce that in place and I'll keep all of the other takes hidden away as a backup in case a client or someone decides they don't like the take anymore and they need me to go back and grab a different vocal take. It's very easy to go into the folder again and switch it out, re-Melodyne it, and export it. So that is why I like to do tuning second. So here we have our tuning. I like to run the vocal through Melodyne, and then I go on my way and can manually edit this stuff, or you can snap it to the grid. You can do a bunch of things in here, but Melodyne's a really great tool for tuning vocals, and you can get quite a natural response out of it as long as you don't go too crazy. So, and a great thing about Melodyne is you can view all your stuff at once. So tuning like the lead vocal, and then we can load up our double track. So say like our double left, and we can see the other vocal behind it at the same time, so the grayed out stuff. So this is already tuned, right? So I've already gone ahead and done this stuff, but you can see if I drag that down, that's the other vocal behind it. So I can match these double tracks up really easily just by putting that in the background, clicking on that icon there that's keeping it grayed out, and then I can match this up really nicely so that the double tracks sound really tight in their pitch. And even timing, you can adjust that in here as well. And that's another great thing. You can view your harmony track while you're editing it in here, and you can just make sure everything lines up nicely. Now, once I'm done tuning my vocal like that, then I'll come back out and I will turn off any plugins on that channel. So like these ones here, anything that I've got Melodyne on, turn off all these plugins, right? Then I will select that vocal. What I'm gonna do is bounce the track in place and commit to that Melodyne tuning. Because the bad thing with the Melodyne plugin is if you want to do any editing after it, you can't, because it's written to the plugin. So if you want to cut silences or you want to cut out noises, you can't do that. And having Melodyne running just takes up CPU anyway. I very rarely come back to it. Never had anyone really complain about the tuning of their vocals. So do a good job, commit to it. You won't need to really worry about it again. And that's why we keep the spare takes just in case. So we'll click on that and then press Control B, and we're going to bounce this track in place. So we want to make sure bypass effect plugins isn't checked, and basically nothing here needs to be checked. We could label this as LVOC tuned, lead vocal tuned. Here we go. And then that is going to render in place. Once that's done, you should have your vocal here with Melodyne written to it, and now you can go ahead and turn that plugin off. And what I like to do is then hide this track. So press H, click on that, press H, hide, mute it, it's gone. So it's hidden in the background if we need to come back to it. And then we just go ahead and we do that for all of the tracks that we're using Melodyne. For this next step, generally I will do my time aligning. Depending on the project, if it needs to be super tight, I'll use a plugin like Vocalize, and that's going to let me use the main vocal as a guide, and I can tell all the double tracks and harmonies to snap to the timing of that guide vocal, which is our lead vocal, and we want them to be nice and tight with that. This is great for kind of like pop stuff and anything where you want super tight vocals. Before you jump into Vocalize though, you need to make sure that your lead vocal or the guide is tight and sounding how you want it with the timing. So generally, if I'm gonna start fixing the timing in vocals, most of the time I'm just gonna do cuts and nudges. So, I'll come in and I'll move it around a little bit and so on and so forth. I've already timed this vocal, so you don't need to sit here and watch me do it. But basically, I'll listen along and I'll listen to the vocal, and if anything sounds out of time, I might cut a phrase, give it a little nudge. You can hold Option and nudge if it's just a little bit out of time. Option and the arrows, you can nudge your vocals across, stuff like that. And if there's anything that's really dramatically out of time, then you might reach for flex time. So we're going to open up flex and put it in monophonic mode. Now, you still have to be pretty careful with flex on vocals because it does create artifacts, especially if you add a chop kind of mid vocal. So let me see if I can show you on this. Say if we like really edit this up, like put all these transients to the beat.
New man on your arm, designer brands.
So you can hear every time the transient hits, there's like this little bump in the sound.
New man on your arm.
Right on, man on. You can hear that.
New man on your...
But right on the vocal. So you have to be pretty careful using this. In a dense mix, you can kind of get away with it a little bit. But what I would try and do generally if I'm using flex on a vocal is see if I can flex it at the start and the end of a phrase and get it to sit a little bit better that way before I start going in and individually nudging things. And the less transients you can use to move stuff around to get the desired result, the better. As you can hear when I did it before, it can get a bit choppy sounding. So go through, nudge stuff around, use a little bit of flex if you need to, and then you should have a nice tight sounding lead vocal. And then once you're done with flex, generally similar thing, I like to bounce it in place, or you can just flatten your edits. So I would just put a cut in the track. So get your scissors, cut it, and then I have J set up for joining these tracks together. Press J, press create, and that's going to join it together and flatten all of your flex edits together. And that should hopefully be the last time we need flex, but we might need it again on some of the backing vocals if vocal line doesn't work nicely. We've got our vocal nice and tight. Next step would be tightening up all these double tracks and harmonies, getting them in sync with that lead vocal. You can either manually do this or you can use vocal line. Obviously, manually doing it takes a lot of time, but you could sit here and do the same thing, just like pull your double track under your lead vocal, nudge it around and match it up as best as you can, and then similar thing, get flex, nudge things, and that's a nice way of doing it. But if you own a plugin like Vocaline, let me show you how we would use this. So basically turn off any plugins you have on your vocals at the moment, and let's just get Vocaline, say, onto our double tracks right here. So under Synchro Arts, Vocaline 5. Okay. I generally don't like to use ARA because it gets a little glitchy, and most times I've used that, it just creates more problems than it's worth. Even though it's a bit quicker, usually something goes wrong with it and it's just a bit buggy. So not sure whether that's just a logic thing or just ARA in general, but I prefer to just do it the old school way and just capture it and then edit it. So what we need to do first is set the side chain in Vocaline. So we just need to make sure this label's a bit identifying on this channel here. So we're going to change it to LVOC123. Just for now, just helps us identify it easily in the side chain. So we're going to come over here to our side chain up the top of this plugin here and look for, we can just type this in because there's a lot of tracks in here. It's hard to find it. LVOC123. There we go. Found it for us right here. Now let's grab Vocaline on the other one. Do the same thing. LVOC123. There we go. Nice and easy. Okay, so the next thing to do would be to line up our playhead with where we want to get this going. So we're going to play from the start of the chorus and just do this first line here so I can show you what it does. Press capture, capture. What this is going to do is capture our double tracks and listen to the guide track, and then it's going to snap the timing of them together.
Now I'm seeing you picturing all these magazines.
Okay. Let's see what it does. It kind of automatically does it. So you can see this is what we captured. This is the guide track up here. And this is the new track here. We can tell it how tight we want it. So let's just go like super tight on both of these. You can just play with that a little bit. You know, a couple of milliseconds difference here and there because we got left and right. Could be good. And then let's have a little listen to how that sounds in solo. How tight are these?
Now I'm seeing you picturing all these magazines.
So pretty good. That should do pretty well for a double track. We don't want them to be perfect anyway. So there's little bits of difference of what creates that stereo width when you have them panned out left and right. If they're exactly the same, it probably just wouldn't sound as good. But that's made it nice and tight. There's no real timing issues there. And so you could go forth and do that to all your vocals. So it is time consuming, but it's definitely not as time consuming as manually doing it. But if you don't have the plugin and you don't want to spend money on it, you can spend that time and you can do it for free using flex time and just cutting and nudging stuff around. You can be a lot more aggressive with doubles and harmonies as far as tuning and editing goes because they generally sit in the background behind your lead vocal or if they are more prominent, they're still not loud enough to tell that you've over-processed them. Unless you've like fully flattened them in tuning, you're not going to hear if you've been a little bit aggressive and you've pushed them to the right note and, you know, squeezed out that sort of wobble in the voice. You're not going to hear that stuff on the doubles and the harmonies. So go forth, edit them as hard as you can until they sound good. That's my philosophy with double tracks and harmonies. Get them so they sound good. Doesn't matter what you got to do. All right. So once that stuff is done, you're going to need to render vocal line in place. So same thing, make sure vocal line's turned on, no other plugins. On the channels that have vocal line, highlight that channel, Control B, and bounce it in place. One other thing that you could do actually before you render vocal line in place, if you have a noisy vocalist, they got a lot of mouth sounds going on. Before you render it in place, you could also chuck on something like Isotope Mouth Declick. So this one here. It can just be a good thing to add to that. Put it after vocal line. These settings are the ones that I like to use. I just have this saved as a default. They don't ever do me any wrong when I'm trying to get rid of clicks. So if you want to copy that, go for it. It seems to work pretty flawlessly for me. So I just chuck this plugin on, bounce it in place, and it removes 99% of those annoying little pops and clicks that you get out of a vocal. So I wouldn't do that on the lead vocal. I'll show you what I do if I'm going to clean up a lead vocal in a second with mouth declicking noises. But yeah, just render it in place and it's going to get rid of those noises for you. So just one extra step of tidying up the vocals. Say your lead vocal has noisy mouth clicks through it and it's annoying, right? So we would put something like mouth declick on here, and then we would, this is our lead vocal, let's just do this little section here. We would render that in place, bounce it in place. Okay, now we've got our audio file that's been declicked. Now the problem with this is, it's okay to do it on double tracks and backing vocals, but it does damage sounds like T's and P's and B's and stuff like that. Any like sort of transient in your vocal, it tries to get rid of it, right? So this is where I would do it this way. If I'm doing the lead vocal, you have to spend a little bit more time on it, but we bounce that in place. And then what we're going to do is highlight our original vocal and the declicked vocal track, right click on it, and then click on Pack Take Folder. Now what we've got here now is a take folder of those two things, the original vocal and then the declicked vocal. Now we can listen to the original vocal. So generally I like to do this in solo and I just listen through, and if I hear a click in the vocal, say there's like one here, then I can just drag into declick and I can remove that sound there, and then we keep going and listening along. And we just edit our way through the vocal until we've gotten rid of all of the annoying clicks by doing it like that. And that way we preserve all the T's and P's and B's and all those little sounds that are important to have a little transient on them, and we don't ruin the vocal. And then once you're done doing that, you could just flatten and merge and lock it in. Done. Okay, so now these vocals should be pretty tidy. We just need to do all the trimming and cleaning up. So generally on the lead vocal, what I like to do is boost up this waveform and just make sure I don't cut too close to the start. We want to make sure if there's a breath, we get the breath. So we just cut a little bit out from the front of it. Generally, if they've done a big breath, you'll be able to see it. And any of this stuff here, we can have a listen.
Before sleep, said we're gonna
A little noise there that's not really important.
take on the world and always
Again, just sounds at the end that aren't really important here that you can see.
called her my special girl. My number.
A little breath there. Now we could leave that for realism. We don't need to get rid of all of the breaths, especially in the lead vocal. It's good to leave a little bit of that stuff. Now what I would generally do for this stuff, because it's quite close together and it's a bit breathy and wordy, I wouldn't cut this stuff out too much. I would come back later and listen to it and just manually gain down any breaths if they're too loud. So we've got a big gap here, so we can just chop this and then keep moving on. And we just do this for all of our vocals. Now, when you get to a section like the chorus here, we've got all these vocals here. We keep treating the lead vocal the same, but then we're gonna cut a little bit closer to all our doubles and harmonies. So down the bottom here, gonna cut them right up next to it. Even on the breaths, for me, I generally don't wanna hear like 5 people breathing in at once. So I'm gonna leave the lead vocal to kind of handle most of the breath sounds, and I'm just gonna cut a lot of that stuff out of the double tracks and keep them nice and clean and tidy. That can be a personal choice kind of thing. If you listen to the mix and you feel like it's not a problem, you can leave them in there. For me, I just like to make these very tight and clean. So there we go. That's our chorus. And then we could go through and just do a couple little cuts on the lead vocal. That looks pretty good. These are just breaths in there, and if they're too loud, we just go through and gain them down, which is what I'll show you once we're done doing this. So you go through and do that to the whole song, which I'm not going to do right now because that'd be very boring for you to watch. Then what I like to do is add fades. Now, you can either just click on these, drag over them, and open your tools, select the fade tool, and do a fade on one of them, get an average kind of fade in going, and then same for the end. Or you could come up into the inspector and type a value up here when they're all selected and do it that way. You can add a curve as well if you want to make the fade a little steeper, but that is generally what I would do, something like that. And then we listen through and we adjust any fades as necessary. So at the start here, we could have a listen.
In the beginning.
It's not really a breath there, so we could cut right up to that.
In the beginning.
Like that. Easy peasy. So then, yeah, we just go through, check out our fades, listen to it, make sure it's all good. And then when we get to the chorus here, generally I treat the fades a little differently because I've cut closer to my double tracks and harmonies. So I'll come up into the value up here and I'll just write a small value of like 50, do a little bit of an upward curve just to keep it tight, and then a fade out of about 90. And then maybe a negative curve just to make it a bit more natural at the end. And then that looks kind of like this, a nice sharp, steep fade in here and a nice curved fade out at the end. We get rid of all those breaths.
These magazines, you forgot about me. New men on your arm.
Pretty sweet, nice and easily done. And that makes our vocals nice and tidy. Then the only other thing that we need to do is listen through to our lead vocal and clean up any breaths that might be too loud. Or if there's any little annoying sounds in between that are kind of hard to cut and fade out, we do it this way. So we double click on the vocal, get up that waveform editor down here, and we can boost this up with this little channel over here. And we can see our breaths in between the vocal takes here, okay? So they're probably not really going to be a big problem in this vocal, but sometimes people breathe really loud. They take a big breath between takes, and that can kind of be annoying, or it can add to the energy in the song. You just got to see what it sounds like. But for example, say if this breath was annoying me, I would highlight it, and then you could go to change gain functions. Now I have this set up as Shift X. I think it is probably a different key command in Logic. You might just have to open functions and have a look at it. But for me, I changed it to Shift X because it just seemed like a nice, easy key command for me to use because I use it a lot. And yeah, then we just set our value. So generally, you know, -5 to -10 on a breath will clean it up easy. So let's just do -10, boom, tuck it away. And you just go through and you can do that. Now you can just listen and find all the big loud breaths like that. Looks like a big loud one there. This looks like a pretty loud breath here. And you can just listen through and tidy these up. And then your vocal is done, ready to be mixed. The last thing I would do is commit your edits. So highlight the vocal and then press J and then create. And that's just going to combine these together. And then you won't have to worry about fades and all those little edits. It'll just be a nice tidy package ready to be mixed. And that is the process of how I'd go about editing vocals and getting them nice and tight and ready for mixing. If you guys have any tips that you want to add, drop them in the comments below. If there's anything that you do a little differently, I'd love to know how you do it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and I will see you guys in the next one.